The Apostle Thomas is one of those characters that I don't think gets nearly enough attention. He really only shows up 3 times in the Gospel of John, but he's there when Jesus resurrects one of his best friends. He's there at the Last Supper to ask a really important question. He's there to demand to touch the hands of the resurrected Christ. Like, for 3 appearances, Thomas is a legend. But even his name is actually a call for us to think about what he represents in the story and how he calls us to think about our own faith journey.
John 11, a man named Lazarus is sick. He's the brother of Mary and Martha. And at this point, we've already read a story about where Mary brings perfume, expensive perfume. She pours it over Jesus' feet. And we know her. We know the relationship there. But here in chapter 11, we get hints that there is actually a long and deep friendship that's developed, not just between Jesus and Mary, but between Jesus and her entire family. In verse 3, we read that the sisters, they send a message to Jesus and they say, Jesus, the one that you love is sick. Our brother is dying. Now, we never really get to see it, but clearly Jesus and Lazarus have met. They've developed this friendship outside the pages of the gospel. That alone is really neat. But the problem is that Mary and Martha and Lazarus, they live near Bethany, and the last time that Jesus was up in Bethany, things did not go well, like at all. In fact, his friends point out to him, Jesus, the last time you went up there, the town tried to kill you. And so they try to dissuade him from going back. They say, look, he probably just needs some rest. Let him sleep it off. You can go visit when the heat dies down. But in verse 14, Jesus tells them plainly, guys, Lazarus is dead. And then he adds, and actually for your sake, I'm kind of glad. This can be a teaching moment so that you may believe as well. Let's go to him. But then we read this, that Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of them, yes, let's go with him. That way, if necessary, we might die with him. A couple things here. Start with this. Thomas, also known as Didymus. That's an interesting one, because both of these names are references to an Aramaic word, Tomah. In Aramaic, Tomah meant twin. So Thomas is a transliteration. It's an attempt to say the Aramaic word Tomah with a Greek inflection, Tomas. Didymus is the actual Greek word that means twin. So the name Thomas, also known as Didymus, is literally just twin, aka twin. And that brings up a surprising number of questions, because the New Testament writers really want us to know that Thomas is called the twin. They're putting it out there in multiple languages, and yet there's not even a hint anywhere in the Gospels of who this twin was. Now, it's very possible that Thomas just had a twin, and that twin wasn't a contributing character to the story. Maybe he moved to another town when he turned 18, had his own life. Who knows? We just don't know anything about him. That's not very fun, though, is it? And so perhaps that's why, very early on, Christians started speculating about this very conspicuous attention to this duplicated, pun intended, name. For example, the Acts of Thomas, a 3rd century Syriac text, says that Thomas was actually the twin brother of Jesus. Now, it doesn't mean that in a biological sense. The text implies that this is intended in a spiritual sense. They even suggest that Jesus travels to India after Jesus' resurrection as his representative, a spiritual brother in a sense, to introduce them to Jesus. Even today, the Church of St. Thomas in India draws its story all the way back to the 3rd century. There's also an even earlier 2nd century text. It's called the Gospel of Thomas, and it speaks of this unique closeness between Thomas and Jesus. So maybe this twin identity has something to it. He is the twin of Christ in a sense. Just as interesting, though, is another angle that other church fathers took. In the 3rd century, a very famous church father named Origen argued that twin the twin was a retronym, and that the gospel writers gave this disciple that name to represent all of us. The idea that faith and doubt are not really opposites. They're two sides of the same coin, twins, perhaps we could say. And even the fact that we have twin here in two different languages kind of reinforces this reading. Faith and doubt are two ways to say the same thing. Hold on to that, we'll come back. But for now, just know, it's a very common reading. St. Ephrem the Syrian in the 4th century develops this idea that Thomas' struggle is the journey of every believer. Augustine picks up that idea, and even modern scholarship, Raymond Brown, gives Thomas the title, the twin of every believer. And this passage here in John 11 is where all of that is grounded. See, often we think of doubt when Thomas comes up, but that's not the theme here in his introduction, is it? Jesus wants to see his friend. The disciples are scared to go with him. Thomas is the one who says, better to be close to Jesus than to hold on to even our own lives. That's not a guy I would label a doubter.